Hello, it's Zoë Routh, and welcome back to the show. I'm thrilled to be here. This is the first recording I'm doing in the new year since I've been on an epic holiday. And my question for you is, how can we have breakthrough conversations? And there are so many polarized topics right now. This episode is essential listening. Let's get into it. On planet human right now, well, the Trump reign of terror has begun. That is the way I'm thinking about it and experiencing it. Though I know there's plenty of people who are celebrating his actions. I am studying every policy move to see its impact on people. And so far, the knock-on effect of many of these policy changes are negative for a lot of people. I'm looking for the cloud with the silver lining, and it ain't there. So stay tuned as we observe the change of power dynamics that are happening in the United States and its flow-on effect for people around the world. So that's Planet Human right now. On Planet Zoe, I am getting back into the groove of things, of being back in Canberra in summer and getting into work again. I've had a really amazing holiday visiting my family in Canada and the US, and then traveling around Japan and going skiing. Yay! There's something to be said for having epic downtime and giving your brain a chance to reset, recalibrate, and get enthusiastic again for the things that matter most to you, like this show and the people who are listening. Thank you so much for tuning in every week. What else is happening on my planet? I want to share with you this really cool product that I've been introduced to called Magic Mind. These folks reached out to me and said, hey, will you test this? I know that you're into deep thinking and deep focus, which I am. And this is a nootropic booster for all of that. It's got some amazing natural compounds, extensive research behind it, but more importantly is the road test. And I took a couple of these away with me and was amazed at the impact of taking one little shot of this green stuff, which kind of tastes citrusy. It's kind of a sweet, energizing taste. And I took it right before skiing, and it just gave me a real whoosh. It helped me ski better. My only regret is that I didn't take more of them with me on the trip. And the lingering effects last for several hours in terms of feeling energized and focused. And just, I felt like the fog cleared from my brain. So that's Magic Mind. I've got an affiliate link in the show notes that puts a few cents back in my own coffers to help pay for the show. It's worth experimenting with. It is a all natural product and it's pretty cool. That's everything on Planet Zoe. What if and how might we? So as I spent my holiday keeping tabs on what's happening around the world, I was wondering, are we witnessing a change of social norms with the advent of rollback of a lot of policies in the United States and other parts of the world, rollback on diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, rollback on the idea of inclusion, rollback on the ideas of environmental protectionism, all these initiatives that are coming out of the Trump regime, which are getting echoed and supported around the world. What's going on here? It feels like a regression. And if you put the lens of leadership maturity development and social values hierarchies, which I do from my leadership development methodologies, then what we do see is a type of shrinking back, a regression, or I guess another way of looking at it, which is less judgmental, is a resurgence of traditional values or different norms. Let's just say they're different. And the different norms that are re-emerging are this idea of competition, of isolationism, of nationalism, of protecting what's ours, which is us versus them. Those kind of paradigms are playing out in economic and social policies. And there are good things and bad things about that. Mostly I see them as bad things in terms of when we have a resurgence of this kind of value set, what tends to happen is our sense of us shrinks. And there isn't a lot of advantage to having a smaller sense of us. Perhaps it feels easier to understand the world. Perhaps it feels easier to defend against the others, if you like. The world is more black and white, easier to make decisions about, easier to make judgments about. And I can see the attraction of looking at those competitive values in spiral dynamics. It's the orange values of competition and wealth, accumulation and success. Abandoning what has been the green set of values, which are environmentalism, inclusion, diversity, etc. So there's this kind of culture war tension happening between these two sets of values. The advantages of these inclusive green values are that we get a whole celebration of diversity. We get access to whole sorts of different perspectives and brains and insights that we can apply to very complex problems in which we find ourselves in complex dynamic systems. The green values and green ways of thinking about the world are better suited to a very complex, interconnected world than the orange ones, which tend to parse things up into this is right, this is wrong. And there's a comfort in that, but there's also a huge debilitation in that. So I guess in terms of how might we is trying to make sense of the good aspects of the orange values and to bring the healthy versions of that online while blending on the healthy versions of the green sets of values, that it's sort of complexity, inclusion, a greater sense of us. I think there is a happy marriage that can be made between the two of them, but we have massive amounts of work to do that, starting with not judging ourselves and not judging others, but really looking for the strengths in our perspectives and where we can find common ground. Lots of really tough leadership work ahead. It is tea time in the office kitchen, and my guest today is Todd Hollow Bist. And we have a very robust, far-reaching conversation about challenging how we think about things, different levels of thinking. And Todd has an enormous amount of experience, 30 years of organizational and academic leadership experience. He is the founder of Pathwise Leadership. And I was really chuffed to have such an extensive, challenging conversation about how we might think differently and have robust conversations, exactly what is needed right now. So without further ado, here is Todd. Well, all the way from Seattle, welcome to the show, Todd Hollow Bist.
Glad to be here, Zoe.
Yes, well, I'm up for a deep conversation, as we said in our preview chat. And there's plenty to talk about when we're talking about the future of thinking and psychology and leadership, all that kind of smushed together or teased apart. I'm not sure which. My first question I have for you is actually, how did you end up getting into this line of work? I'm curious also about people's pathways. And so it seems like an interesting weave to bring all those things together. How'd you get here?
Yeah, I was probably more of an anthropology major than a psychology major earlier in my life. And so I spent a lot of time traveling. And at a certain point, I found that it would be really interesting to get this job working at a group home. And what I was, compelled by it is like I was going to meet all these people that I wouldn't normally meet in a normal walk of life. So these were kids with Down syndrome, with Asperger's, with other brain injuries. And I was an undergrad. And in doing this work, I kind of fell in love with these people and ended up being pretty good at what I did. And so kind of went from there to graduate school in psychology and exploring the mind and how things work in that way. And then did that for about 10 years, worked at a psych hospital, taught at a college, became dean for a while at the college. And my really good friend at the time and business partner now worked at senior leadership positions at Boeing and other companies. And we would sit around and we'd have a beer or something sitting in a hot tub, and he would be like, Todd, I'm struggling with this person.
Because you just hang out with your mates in a hot tub.
Exactly. And he's like, well, I'm struggling with, there's this one VP and I'm trying to work with him, and he's struggling with this other VP. And he really hadn't quite the psychology background at that time. And I would say things like, well, this person has this personality, this one has this, and this is where they struggle. And he would go and bring it back to them and work with them. And all of a sudden these huge relationships would change. And then, a month later, we'd have another beer and some new situation. It was more leadership business based because my stuff was more clinical and academic. And he would go apply it and it would change it. And then one time we're in the hot tub, we're having a beer, and we're like, hey, we should start a business doing this.
Yeah,
And
call
literally,
it hot tub leadership coaching. I'm just
we could. Yeah, we can make a movie. There's a couple good hot tub time machine movies. Yeah, so we woke up the next day, called each other, and said, "Let's do this." And so that was almost 20 years ago. Since then, been working with corporate vice presidents at Microsoft and Google CEOs, and basically sharing all the stuff. And for me, I still think at the bottom of it all, I'm still an anthropologist. Meeting all these people from these different walks of life it brings joy to me. So that's how I got into it.
cool. I love how the hot tub is the pivotal turning point in all of this. I'm curious, what out of, you've been through lots of different um, hills and crevices. What's the most interesting thing that you've learned about the brain or psychology, or even dealing with leadership executives that sort of stunned you, if anything has?
Yeah, there's probably two things. So on the practical, easier to describe thing, what most people don't know, like people know that there's like personality types and that is in the modern knowledge, but not known is that brain functions in different cognitive states. So the example I would use is like we see kids running around. So little kids, if they're like birth to one, they're being taken care of by their moms or dads, and it's attachment theory. Kids get a little older, they're about 4 or 5, and they start exploring the world, and the parents and teachers are holding them back if they can, if they're hurt. And they're about 12, their feeling parts of their brain come online, and all they want to do is hang out with their friends. And later it's abstract reasoning, and it keeps going. And what most of us as adults don't know is that all day, every day, we are going up and down those cogwheels. So if I have a really, really horrible day and I just need to go home and fall apart, and you put brain monitoring me and on an infant, we'll actually be using the same parts of the brain. If I'm triggered at work because some colleague does something and I'm fighting back and yelling, I'm using the same part of the brain as a 5-year-old. And so all day long, we're going up and down in psychological age. And I think that has at least as much impact on us as leaders and as colleagues as these different personality types.
I've never heard of
That's what
psychological
blew me.
age. That's really interesting. The only sort of framework I've really worked with along this lines, or actually it's two frameworks. One is the fight flight neurological system as a framework to look at why people react to things as the way that they do, or developmental theory, which talks about different stages of leadership maturity. But psychological age is an interesting lens through that. What other lenses do you use to look at people dynamics?
That's probably the main one. The second one that we use is psychoanalytic personality. So this is you pulled straight out of DSM-5, Axis 2, the stuff that psychologists and psychiatrists use, as far as these different types, because it's a body of research around and developing for 100 years with large amounts of people looking at it. So if you think about Myers-Briggs or Insights or all these other kind of interesting programs, they're all kind of built out of the real thing, which is the stuff that psychiatrists use. And usually we use this with all of our members, but why it's kind of difficult is that these are terms like narcissist or manic depressive, which are psychiatric names. But early in the program, what we do is we talk about those cognitive levels that I was mentioning earlier. So if somebody is acting like a child most of the time, and they get called and they get a label like narcissist, they probably labeled narcissist by a psychiatrist. But if somebody's high functioning and a CEO of a company or a sports star, and most of the time they're acting like an adult, and every once in a while they fall apart, that's not a diagnosis, but they're still using that same sort of personality structure and ways of interacting in the world. And so all of us have a personality type. And if you know somebody's type and you know their psychological age, you kind of know how best to interact with them and get along.
And how many different personality types are there in this model?
There's sort of 9 classic personality types
Okay.
that we use for the cognitive levels. Keegan, so he teaches out of Harvard,
Yeah.
and for the personality types, we use Nancy McWilliams, who wrote a book called Psychoanalytic Diagnostics. It's taught it in every program that teaches psychoanalysis. It's sort of like the Bible of psychoanalysis.
So
So those
please,
are.
oh, sorry, go on.
Oh, go ahead. That's it. And there's a third factor, but so those are probably the 2 main factors. And the third one is what people nowadays call mindfulness or presence or being in the zone. And in psychoanalysis, it's called suspension of attention. And we've been using that term for about 20 years. And initially, it was interesting. We'd be like at Microsoft or Google, and we'd be like, hey, let's be present. And they thought we were all new age people. And now 20 years later, it's like everybody thinks they know what presence is because they have an app and it's a fad. But what presence is interesting. It's a very specific right frontal lobe activity that integrates the whole of us and collecting all these different data streams, being and feeling and being in the body integrated. And why that's important is if I get triggered and I want to go down in cognitive levels, if I can be present, I can resist that. I can actually sort of stay an adult maybe when I'm being pulled to react like a child.
So that's really cool. So mindfulness is a tool to help us stay in more present adult-like behaviors, even though likely we'll get drawn into different of the cognitive levels. So with the cognitive levels, you mentioned, infant, toddler, and adult. Are there different layers to that or different striations? Is there a top level you can get to, like old person?
Yeah, of course. I mean, just for this, I'm simplifying it,
Sure.
and reading is a simple way to kind of get to it. But yeah, there's you could say abstract reasoning is like level 4. Then there's abstract feeling, and you got to think of the levels as like Russian dolls. That the higher levels include the lower levels,
Yeah.
but the lower levels don't include. So somebody who you could think of it like somebody who can think like a teenager, and then somebody who can think like an adult who has maybe children, some responsibility, and that's kind of actually the leadership level. And the level above that would be kind of like a grandparent, like cognitive level 5, which is somebody who now cares about the whole, is probably not quite as productive anymore, but is all about passing on what's been learned and the possibilities to those younger than them.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't really push for cognitive level 5 in the leaders we work with because they would not be good leaders anymore because they would care about humanity more than productivity. There's like a transition there.
And that makes them bad leaders?
Well, it depends on you would want Gandhi to be a leader of a country, but probably not the leader of Microsoft.
Interesting. Because of the focus on a larger time frame and scale of responsibility and ripple effect, as opposed to let's get widgets out the door.
In fact, like a company CEO has to care about the growth. And if somebody's in this cognitive level 5, they can't differentiate between the company and the public as a whole. And companies, the competition is no longer there in the same way.
So my mind is mapping it to the later stages of leadership maturity in that integral leadership developmental model. So that's where my brain's going to. I'm like, wow, that sort of challenges my understanding of what those later stages could possibly be and whether they're productive or not. So it's interesting that I'm not sure if you discourage people or you don't speak to it as much. Could you just unearth that a little bit for me?
Yeah. So what I'm saying is it's when you first enter a career, it's probably good to be this sort of level 2, what Keegan calls, because you're kind of competitive. You want to get at and it's all about mastery and empire building. And then you get to level 3, which is more about managing groups of people and being on teams.
Mm-hmm.
And Keegan's cognitive level 4 is more about leadership. It's like, where can I can see the system and I can see where things can go, but we still have goals. Mm-hmm. Level 5 is about societal greater good. It's like, if you're a Christian, this is true probably of any religion, but if you're a Christian, Christ would probably not be a good leader of Google, right? And yet he's functioning at a very, very high level. Mm-hmm. Now, earlier in his life, maybe as a teenager, so these higher levels, it depends on what the leadership is for. If it's for profit, cognitive level 5 doesn't really care about profit in the same way, but they do care about humanity. Does that make sense?
It does, but I'm pushing against, or I'm feeling resistance to this, to say that you can't, that you, I'll just try and reset my brain and go, okay, if you have a consciousness which is all about humanity and social good, can you not also sit with a level 4 ambition and to use those profits for social good, as opposed to just the internal mechanism of the company? So that's why I'm thinking level 5 is also good and could also be a productive level 4 leader.
Think of level, yeah, it could. It depends on what it is. Like level 5, I think this is raising Bill Gates a little too much, but you could say Bill Gates, as chairman of the board, is moving more to a cognitive level 5 thinker.
Yeah.
But he's not going to be concentrated on day-to-day profits of Microsoft.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It totally does. So it's where are you putting your attention and energy the most?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're a leadership, but on a bigger scale. In fact, I mean, I could be controversial. Let's say, like, if you've read Karl Marx or Das Kapital, it's interesting because Marx is pushing for communism, but he also said that communism will not be able to be around for about 2,000 years from when he wrote, because the human brain is not developed enough to go in that direction. And so like communism, like Chinese communism it's not communism at all. But let's go through it. Like, what is hunter gathering, where you expect the world to provide food for you? Let's say it is kind of like Keegan's level 1. Mm-hmm. Empire building, like being like warring and getting what you want, is kind of like level 2.
Yeah.
Democracy, social democracy, is kind of like level 3.
Sure. Yeah.
So communism is sort of like level 4. So actually, any human system also goes through these parallel cognitive levels, right? And they're good at different things.
Yeah, I'm getting a collision of in my brain. I'm getting a collision of different maps of understanding human development, human growth, human patterns, and trying to figure out which one is the most useful and which one is challenging my beliefs. And I think we're finding a little bridge in there, which is cool.
Good. Yeah. And I like, I'm into discussion. I'm just sharing what I understand.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you for that. So if I'm going to summarize my understanding, so the cognitive levels go through different things. Level 4 in this one is sitting with leadership and looking at how a system is manifest in an organization or in an industry, and you still have goals. Level 5 is more about the transformation and care of humanity and a larger social good, societal good, planetary good, perhaps. And they transcend and include each other. So you never lose the earlier stages. You still have those as a resource. And if you're triggered during the day, you might go down to a different level in terms of your response. Is that correct?
Yes. And I can add a little bit on that last piece if you're interested.
Okay, yes.
So the brain wants to go up and develop over time, sort of naturally. There's 2 things that push down brain functioning in a day or across time. And they're the combination of ambiguity and stress at the same time. So not just ambiguity.
We have a ton of that right now. Ambiguity and stress.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, we do. Well, yeah, exactly. So it's not just ambiguity. So if you and I inherited $1 billion, but we have to move to Paris to get it, and we don't speak French, we're like, we'll figure it out. Like, there's not a lot. The money would take the stress away. And the research shows even stress on the short term, if it's something you know how to do, you can actually do better. Like if I know exactly how to code or I know exactly how to teach and there's a little bit of pressure, I can, but it's doing what I know how to do, then I can actually teach a little bit better in the short term. If it's continuous in the long term, I could burn out. In the short term, it can actually improve outcomes. But if I don't know what to do and I have to do it now, there's lots of stress and ambiguity. That's actually what takes me, let's say if I'm usually living at level 3, that takes me down to 2. So those triggers are often triggers that trigger this sort of ambiguity response and stress response that move us down in cognitive levels. Mm. And the thing around presence, if you think of it as a muscle, is the thing that we try to exercise to keep us from going down or actually go up.
It's an interesting one. And I see the application for helping us to self-regulate, self-modulate when we're swimming in the sea of ambiguity and stress. Saw it yesterday in a group that I was working with, where we're about to do a feedback exercise. And the stress response in the room was quite volatile, actually. And quite a few people said, I don't feel comfortable doing this. And I thought, wow, okay. So I've been processing that and reflecting on that, going, the threat of giving each other constructive and positive feedback was enough to push people down levels, if you like, into this reactive, self-protective mode. And I thought, there's a opportunity here to help people build the capability to process feedback and to be able to deliver and receive it well. Mindfulness might be a strategy for that. How might you, if you were to be working with this particular team, where would you start? What would you do with them?
I'll try to respond as best as I can because I wasn't there, so I don't have all the data.
Yeah.
So I can share with you the model that I would use. So the model that I would use, and this works with humans and any mammal, basically. So you kind of understand these cognitive levels, and we talked about attachment research earlier. Mm-hmm. And there's this really interesting set of studies around attachment. So if there's a baby in one room, and I, as a caregiver, walk into that room, and this has been done at Stanford and lots of places, and I walk in and I'm a Zen master, I'm meditating and I'm super calm, and the baby's screaming because it needs its diaper changed or whatever. If I stay kind of in that state and kind of grab the baby and try to help it, what does it do 9 times out of 10, according to the research, do you think? It's counterintuitive.
My guess is the baby calms down.
Yeah, so that's is literally what I thought and what everybody says, but the research shows that 9 times out of 10, the baby looks at the adult and does it. There's these things called mirror neurons, like we can feel what each other are feeling. And because there's no connection, no attachment between the caregiver and the child, the child tends to scream louder. Because it's like, you don't get me. Like, I guess I'm not conveying what I need. And so they've done this experiment, and then they'll do a second, and this one's a trick question too. So there's 2 trick questions and then one simple question. So now imagine the baby screaming. I have an affect, like I'm worried about the baby. Now I act calmly, I behave calmly, but inwardly I'm like, oh, my baby's hurting. It's what's going on. And I go in there and I get the baby and I check its diaper, I feed it, and I stay in this sort of same response as the kid. What does the kid do 9 times out of 10, do you think?
Well, now I'm thinking, well, it sort of got the kid. The kid's going, you get me. You understand I'm stressed. You're stressed. The mirror neurons are activated. So it goes, right, we're good, and calms down.
Yeah.
Okay.
See, good. So this is again what everyone says. So thank you. So you match the kid, and the kid goes, "You get me," but because you don't calm down, the kid doesn't calm down. Uh-huh. So kids actually learn how to regulate their affect system by their caregivers. So as long as I stay kind of risen too, then the kid's going to stay risen too. And then option 3 is, so I go in. I'm worried with the kid. I mirror them. I check the diaper, and then I start to calm down my emotions, my affect system, and I become more calm and present. Then 9 times out of 10, the kid follows us. And so I would say that model is the model that leaders can use best with people they're working with, teams, with crowds of people, that same model of matching and then moving is what I would probably have tried with that group of people, is to be worried with them, like what's going on, and to have been scared or felt what they're feeling. As soon as they feel that I could feel what they're feeling, like we're in the boat together, then I would probably start to calm down and try to move it into a different sort of conversation, or a more calm version of the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. That's a really pragmatic, a practical approach, meet them where they are and then lead them into a better state, which also challenges another understanding I had of the Zen master, the calm and healing presence. So that if you waft through life as a calm and healing presence, it pulls people into your, I don't know, surroundings or your atmosphere and calms people down. But you're saying actually that's not true. As a Zen master, you would have to meet them where they are and then turn into the ocean of peace. Is that sort of, did I capture that correctly?
Yeah. That yes, very much so. Because I mean, maybe if the person is very calm, and people are attracted to calmness and want it and can feel it, then maybe when they're calm, then they can see the depth of their calmness and be attracted to them. But if they're in a moment of like agony or stress or worry, and the Zen master is just like completely Zen, I think the response that most of the time comes up is condescending. like people like, oh, this is, you're like looking down on me, or it hits people's own shame, like, well, there must be something wrong with me.
Yeah.
But if the Zen master or the priest or the whatever goes, oh, that must be hard, like, yeah, that of course you're terrified. And then there's an attachment, there's a connect, there's trust. Once there's trust, then you can begin to come back to a different kind of qualities.
Can you do this from a genuine place? Because I think the reason I asked that, because I'm imagining if you do have a great sense of self-mastery, you go into, let's go back to the scenario of the room, there's a whole bunch of stress in the room, and then you mirror that by appearing stressed. Do you actually have to feel stressed? Or do you just mirror?
That's the hard part. No, the behavior you can hug people, the behaviors don't matter. Our capacity to read affect systems, and usually consciously or unconsciously, is very strong.
Okay.
So you actually have to experience. So I know, quite a few leaders will go into a room and a project's going sideways and they're like, everything's going to be great. And the room goes, yeah, whatever, boss, internally, and along with it, but definitely does not go along with it.
Okay. So you're more likely to.
Can I share one last thing just related? Yeah. So the background, proof in the pudding is, in traditional psychotherapy, there are probably different gifts, different things that are happen between the two people. But this is essentially what most people are paying for. Therapists are doing what I'm talking about all around the world. Their client comes in, they're matching them, they're understanding their concerns, and they're feeling it with them. And then once there's trust, and sometimes it takes a day and sometimes it takes 10 years, but once there's trust, you can begin to share alternative perspectives once there's connection. So where this is being done, and if a therapist can't do that authentically, they're probably not going to have a job for long.
Okay. So I think as you mentioned there, we're more all like the mirroring stuff happens subconsciously or naturally because we're wired to be like that. So that part of the equation of they're stressed, I'll feel stressed, probably happens automatically. That's not the part of the mastery piece, I don't think. You can tell me if I'm wrong. The mastery part is recognizing what you're feeling, doing that empathy piece, connecting with them where they are, and then. And I want to ask you how you do this. How do you, once you know that there's trust, to then lead into a different state? That's the mastery piece, those two parts. So my question, first of all, did I get the frame? Did I understand the framework correctly?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So second question is, how do you know there's trust? What are the clues so that you know that you can start to move them into a different state?
So let me back up a little bit and then go, and if I lose it, then come back to this. So
Okay.
the secret is going from sympathy to empathy.
Okay.
That's where most people get stuck. So my spouse or my friend is sad, they're somebody's died. And sympathy means that I go and I spend time with them and I remember that, somebody in my family died. And so we can kind of feel the same emotion. But sympathy is I'm now going to imagine onto their situation. I'm going to get lost in the feeling, basically. I'm going to imagine another situation that it's just like mine. Empathy, which is a different functional state, empathy is I can share this feeling with them just as they're having it, but I'm not identified to the feeling too. I can also separate from it. It's there, but it doesn't own me. Whereas sympathy, you tend to be the emotion.
Yeah.
And so what happens a lot of times is I'll connect with the baby or with my coworker or with a client, and then we'll get lost in the sympathy as opposed that I need to be able to share that sympathy, but have empathy, be able to step and be more objective about it. Remind me of the last questions you had.
Once you're there in empathy, how do you know? And that's presumably the jumping off point where you have trust, and then you can move to guide them to a different state. How do you know there's trust?
Yeah, there's just many factors. One, probably the hack is when somebody unconsciously starts nodding with you, that usually means that they're leaning in, and that there's that trust there. It's sort of in the West, it's not international, but for Western cultures, we tend to nod when we're in alignment. So you can pick up.
I'm nodding. Yes, I'm aligned with you. I'm with it.
But there's caveats around that. Some people are really naturally good at this, and they kind of have to work on the intellectual piece. And some people can intellectually understand this, and need to develop their feelings. And around this, one of the things that you do is testing. So let's say you and I are in alignment, and I go in and I do a presentation to my team, and I want my team to go in this new direction, and they're all thought it was going to fail, and now I aligned with them, and they kind of get that I see the problems that they see. And so testing means you take like little steps in the new direction and you see how they respond. So it does look like this is going to be a tough road, but I think we can move the timeline out further, which will give us a little bit. And if we go in this direction, and then you see whether they're aligned, they're going with you. And if they're not, then you have to go back to the affect alignment. So there's little tests like that. Okay. And then, collecting data by other people around them. I mean, there's different things. But,
okay. So you're basically gauging their body language in some ways. Do they, they retreat? Do they scowl? Do they lean in and nod? Is a very, cursory way of looking at that. Okay.
Yeah. And in Pathways, I guess we work on developing our feeling sense of others. So it's becoming more in tune with this relationship of feeling than it is behaviors. But most of the time, behaviors align. But you could say somebody, like if two people hug, they could do it because they care. They could do it because one's trying to control the other one. They could do it as a manipulation. So underneath what people are feeling is often more true than the behavior.
I get it. Yeah, you can behave in any number of ways, and it's a mask, but it's the narrative that's going on in the body. So is this this pathway to feelings? Is this how you develop self-awareness? Is this part of your strategy to help leaders develop self-awareness?
Yeah, very much like, so suspension of attention is, which is the bedrock of Pathways. It is all about self-awareness and then awareness of others. And it's not just awareness of when things are good, but what happens is we tend to go down in cognitive levels when there's things about ourselves or the situation we don't want to see.
Mm.
And so how to be aware when I do that thing that I always do is the pattern. So like this, our second class is transference analysis. And as I talked about these brain stages,
Yeah.
um, like one example would be in fifth grade in the States, and probably in Australia too, there tends to be a golden period for friend groups. Not always, but usually. So it's the kids on the block or the kids in the neighborhood or church, and it's before most of the hormones kicked in. And usually kids really start wanting to hang out. And at that age, that becomes the model. Like the brain actually opens up, releases very specific hormones of being malleable to, okay, how I'm going to fit in a social setting. And after not that long, after maybe 3 to 6 months, that model starts getting hardwired. So think of the brain as like highways and freeways that are getting stronger versus like a black box of something happening. And we keep using this highways and freeways, and as we use them more and more, they get more strong, and that becomes our model. And then usually around in eighth grade, when the hormones kick in, we start competing and fighting with our peer groups a little bit, even if we like them. And we get this model of what it's like when things are bad. And what's striking is when I'm in a social group now, I'm often trying to create this fifth grade experience where I'm in this role and my friends are doing this kind of thing, and having taught this now for like all these people in these classes go, oh my gosh, that is weird. My team, I interact with them in that way. And then when the teams are going sideways because of pressures or whatever, there's more ambiguity and stress, and the team starts competing, I tend to flop into the role that I did when my peer group was like that. And so these models, and what I might find is that I can be present and not do either of them. I have to. So if my team is going sideways, maybe I'm present and I don't project that it's my seventh grade group of friends. And instead of like my reaction is, I'm done. Okay, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And lots of people, when their teams fall apart, they just quit, right?
Yeah.
And they do it over and over again. So can I be present and see, hey, this is probably going to last 6 months and get better, and it's better if I stay. So you begin to see these models and be present, and don't always have to do our normal reactions.
Which for me is run away and hide in scenario
Yeah,
like that.
You and I would be off cornered together.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you have to, like I was thinking about this incident yesterday, it was fresh in my mind, where the last exercise of the day, basically, there was revolt and like, no, we're not doing it. Not from everybody, but for a vocal group. And if they didn't feel comfortable doing it, the discussion took up the remaining time before we even had a chance to do it. So I was a little, I don't know, I was not quite rattled, disturbed, I guess, and disappointed in myself that I hadn't actually foreseen this might be a possible reaction in this scenario. And I just wanted, at the end of the thing, they all thanked me. It was lovely. And they were having lunch. And I'm like, okay, bye. Time to go. Gotta go. Run away, run away. So the alternative to that would just to be sit with that discomfort. I'm guessing you can tell me what you would do. Sit with that discomfort, allow it to wash through me, and just go, okay, this is my year 8 self, my grade 8 self, feeling like the in-group has now kicked me out or criticized me, and I'm just shrinking into that teenager a little bit, and just go, that's okay. I don't have to be that teenager. I'm a 54-year-old woman now. I don't have to react like that. Is that how you would do it, or is there a different strategy for that?
Yeah, no, exactly. So what I would do it exactly like that, but little bits that I would add is I would be present enough to go, do I want to use, because we think in a way it's better to think of presence as a muscle that we can strengthen over time, but it's not a light switch. It's not like I can do whatever I want whenever I want and I have tons of energy. So if I'm present and I invest all this energy to struggle, like you were saying, in that situation, it's going to cost me a lot of energy. And sometimes it's worth it. and sometimes it's not. So I would be present enough to go and make that decision. Am I going to consciously try here, even though it's going to be more exhausting, but it's important, or, it's not worth it. So it's a conscious choice there.
Sorry, can I just clarify what you mean though? So when you say try to push through the feeling, or just do I'm just going to run away default. Is that what you mean? Just try and stay and move through it?
Yeah, make the decision whether I'm going to try to stay in higher cognitive levels.
Okay.
Which will be a great effort, which could mean stay there and keep talking with them, or doing whatever, higher, or it could mean I have any energy left. I'm going to be present enough to go, no, I'm just going to sort of tastefully, gracefully go.
Yeah. Okay.
And hide. And it's time for me to hide. There are times when it's best to go hide and rest. I just don't want to only do that. That should not be my only choice.
Right. Thank you. That's helpful. It takes away the embarrassment and shame of oh, I'm the year 8 kid again. That is really helpful. And had the session continued after lunch, where I still had more work to do with them, of course I would have stayed and worked that a little bit more. But I did run away, and I was exhausted all afternoon as a result of that, just holding it through that little space there, and holding their anxiety throughout the whole decision-making process and activity that we were doing.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I feel like it's like we've done this for a long time in working with people, and the leverage I have is that I can go up, I can struggle to stay in higher cognitive levels with differing groups, and I love differing groups. I think it's as an anthropologist again, I just did a cryptocurrency major event with these classes with this level of depth with a bunch of cryptocurrency people who I didn't know they would be interested in this, because this isn't cryptocurrency, and they loved it, and it was wonderful. So signing up for this, but so I've been doing this for a while, but often if I'm in a decent space and it goes sideways, it's not, it's okay sometimes that it's not me. And I am a first to blame myself person, but it's not me.
It's interesting. I like the coming back and self-analysis is the practice as a leader and as a facilitator, and knowing that you're going to have reactions, and it's how you roll with those, I guess, process them and metabolize them. That's really useful. So thank you for saying that sometimes it's okay to activate a lower cognitive level.
Well, at Friday nights, I think most of us, after the end of the work week, all purposely activate a lower level for a while to rest, or at least Saturday morning. But the other end of it, and that I really respect, his name was Michel de Salzman. He was a psychiatrist, and I went to Paris and I met with him. And at the time, this was quite a long time ago, I was a therapist. I loved therapy because it's just me and another person, just nice and quiet and beautiful, and I was kind of shy, and the time we were spending together was about being present. That's kind of why I visited him. And he shared with me, he's like, well, what do you want? And I go, well, he said, you should be a teacher. And I looked at him, I go, I don't want to be a teacher. That sounds like the worst thing in the world, is to have to be a teacher around a whole bunch of people and all that stress and not know. And he goes, well, if you value being present, then you should be a teacher, because it's not natural to you. You always it will force you to be present. And then someday you will master it. And I actually went home back here to Seattle and kind of left one part of my job, not my private practice, but and actually within 2 weeks had a job as college professor. It completely changed my career. So sometimes it's good to go into chaos for growth, and sometimes it's good to rest. And something in us kind of knows.
That's lovely.
Which one to do.
All right, I'll trust my intuition a bit more on that, and we'll continue to circulate it. Todd, I realized We're going through lots of things, and there's one question I haven't asked yet, which I was really looking forward to asking. Dialectic thinking, and how does this lead to innovative conversations?
Okay, so dialectic thinking is a way for a group of either two people or more to go from level two, which is debate,
Mm-hmm.
to level three, which is kind of sympathy and getting along, up into level four. And this it's we have a whole, like, usually this is like a 3 hour lecture, so it's hard for me to shorten this. But what a dialectic can do, related to what we've been speaking about, is if you have a feeling about, let's say, if you have an argument about American politics, which maybe you don't care, but
Oh, I
and
care.
I have a okay, good. I have a sense of American politics. And let's say you and I could debate, and the debate would be, I would argue my intellectual points, and you'd argue your intellectual points. And both of us maybe hear each other's data, but related to this feeling each other, we would not know what the other person's feeling,
Mm-hmm.
and we would probably not even know what we're feeling.
Okay.
And it's the relationship with the feeling. So the dialectic is, you share what, and we do this class, like we just did it on the US elections, which I wasn't so sure would go well. And it was wonderful because we had a mix of different political backgrounds. But if I can hear not just what you're saying, but how you feel about it, and then I can empathize with your feeling, I can understand where you're coming from, and we can have a different discussion. And then once you feel that, I
Yeah.
can also then share with you how, what I'm thinking, and if you will do the work of hearing how I feel about it. So it's like doing this therapist client thing, except for each person's taking turns being the therapist and the client and going back and forth.
Yeah.
And what that can often do, what it's done for 20 years in these classes, and they how people fold this out to other things, you usually end up leaving the room having immensely greater perspective than you have. It's sort of a growth mindset type thing. And in that, often there's new solutions that neither side has ever thought of
Mm.
and willing to entertain. So the goal of dialectic is to come to a bigger systemic understanding and solution, which is the opposite of debate, which is to win.
Wow, that's really fascinating that the incorporation of feelings, discussion around feelings and empathy allows us to get to that stage. Mind blown. I didn't anticipate that. I can see cognitively, you could talk about data, then you talk about systems thinking, and then you get to the end. And sort of my process of getting there skips the feeling part. But
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't sound like you can very well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you can. It just won't go well.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That was awesome. Todd, are you ready for
Yeah.
the fast three?
Uh, okay. Uh, sure. I'm willing to do. I'll try to be. I'll try to be fast.
Quite often it turns
Let's
into the fast-ish three. But anyway, we'll have a crack. Number one, what is the future technology you most want right now?
fusion. I
Nuclear
think
fusion?
fusion. Fusion. So fission is what creates nuclear
Yeah.
weight, like nuclear
Yeah. Yeah.
nuclear reactive. But fusion is the opposite,
Yeah.
and it's like bonds hydrogen, and it would help the environment, unlimited energy. They've been working on it for 20 years, and they've got some small forms of it
Yeah.
where it's producing more energy than it takes, but it's, probably not in my lifetime.
Mm.
But I think fusion would revolutionize the world and help the environment, help everything. It's that, or like a transporter where I can travel around the world. That would be cool too. But
Teleportation
fusion is a
is
practical one. Yeah.
fusion is good. I've been following that technology as well. And teleportation is still the number one favorite technology that people cite. So there's something about
Huh.
travel that people find challenging. Okay, number two.
I thought of that first. I just think that that's definitely not happening in my lifetime.
I suspect not. Okay, number two. Best tip you ever got for leadership?
Oh, um, I want to do two if that's possible. So I don't even know why this first one, but it's just been in my brain since I was in high school. So I played high school football, and we were a pretty serious team. And our coach, even the year after us, went to the national championships for high school. But he had this saying, he was a pretty remarkable man. He had this saying, uh, don't just practice, practice perfect. And that seems like a high bar, but what he was saying is, you will play how you practice. So if you practice at 80% all the time, then when it's time to show up, you'll play at 80%. So I found value in that. And the other one would be, everything is solved with greater awareness.
Wow. That's powerful. Both those things are really powerful. Okay. Thank you so much for that. Number 3, what are you reading or listening to right now?
So I hopefully your viewers know that I probably very philosophically interested from this conversation. So what currently I'm reading is a book called Opening by William Siegel. Credible man. He was he had a printing company and was an artist and knew the Dalai Lama. But this book is I'm finding it it gets me to these higher level 5 just reading it, which I don't find very many texts that take me pretty quickly to deep, caring thought.
Beautiful. I have circled that on my notes. Thank you so much for that. And that was the fast 3.
Okay, good. Fast enough. Good.
Yeah, it's not fastish. That was fast. Awesome. Todd, is there anything that we haven't discussed that you'd like to share with the audience before we sign off?
No, I don't know that much could be added. It was such a lovely conversation. I deeply enjoyed this. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, had a few shifts myself, so that was awesome. That's always a reward for me as the host. Where can people find out more about you and your work?
Through Google or your search engine, just Pathwise, PATHWISE leadership. So all1.com is probably the first intro. And if anybody gets interested, and we teach half our classes are in person, kind of throughout the United States, sometimes fly to other places, including Australia. And the other half is actually done through Zoom. So we have probably 250 people currently in these 10 people groups all around the world in different time zones. So people can go through our coursework that way. So I'd love to talk to any of your viewers who are interested.
Thank you. Well, I got huge value just out of this conversation. So I'm sure there's plenty of value in your programs. Todd, thank you so much for sharing all your wonderful wisdom and insights with me today. I really appreciate it. And I got heaps out of this conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Thank you too.
Read to Lead. My book recommendation for you this week is Ruth Ben-Ghiat's Strongmen. It's a fantastic book, and I have recommended this book on a number of different occasions in all sorts of places. The subtitle is How They Rise, Why They Succeed, How They Fall. And why I recommend this book is because it's a great, thorough, extensive look at autocrats, how autocracy has risen and fallen around the world. And we can look at the patterns, the social patterns that give rise to these strong men, and thankfully, what brings them down. Why do I celebrate or highlight this? Is because it gives us a roadmap to look at what we're looking at in various countries around the world, aka the USA right now, with the rise of autocracy there through the Trump administration. It's scary stuff, and yet this book helps us see the patterns, unpack it, and give us courage to take actions that others did and to bring down their autocrats. So that's what I recommend for you this week. That's it for the show this week. I really hope that you enjoyed the show and got some rigorous ways of looking at your thinking. If you did enjoy the show, please share it with others. Tell others what you learned on the show. Write me a note to let me know what you enjoyed, what you got out of the show. It makes it much more of a conversation. Feel free to subscribe on the video if you're listening, or in your podcast app, wherever you are listening. In the meantime, live with grace, lead in service. See you next week.